This is episode 307 of Rogue State of Mind, formerly known as Life Radio. Today, I'm interviewing Kyle Peche on a bunch of different topics, but an overall philosophy of how to approach detox and optimal health. A lot of people wonder where to start, and so they get into green juicing and fasting and all of these different things that they're reading online. But it's great to have a strategy, an order of operations of what to do. And for Kyle, that's starting with the colon. So in this show, he talks about the 4 steps of how he would approach detox safely, working on the colon first, and then the liver, then the lymphatic system, and then lastly, going for the parasite detox. A lot of people will start with parasites first, and that can cause a lot of turbulence. We also talk about glyphosate, EMFs, and just simple EMF mitigation tips, his thoughts on microplastics and how to detox from them, and why he likes HTMA, hair tissue mineral analysis, to address people's physical problems, but also psychological issues that they're working through. So we're going to jump into it. Enjoy the show. Here is Kyle Peche. Okay, we're here with Kyle Peche. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Matt.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you. Seems like we've had a similar history of brain fog and anxiety and skin stuff. You have a interesting story. And what's cool is through your healing journey, you've come up with solutions or found, what worked for you. And now you're helping others to help with similar things. So that focus of my show and my work is, yes, educate, but really, really focus in on solutions and even offer like free to spending some money and then spending a lot of money, and just offer options for anyone in different walks of life. I think is really important.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tools out there. Yeah. So yeah, what led you down this path of studying all this stuff like parasites and EMFs and microplastics and all the stuff we're going to be talking about?
Yeah. Well, I got pushed into it just like you. I always kind of had a interest in health since I was young, but I didn't really know how to kind of pursue it. But something I did experience throughout my life was this kind of disconnect from reality, this kind of mild brain fog, this kind of like low grade anxiety, this kind of low grade depression, and also this kind of like I was always functioning only on second gear. Every time I tried to shift into third, fourth, fifth, and really get more torque out of my nervous system and my brain, I would just keep hitting a wall. Which led to a lot of frustration in terms of like academics and athletics and all that stuff, right? But I was relatively functional. And then, I around 18, 19, I had an emotional stressor related to my family that just caused my health to just completely tank. And pretty much overnight, I had, a laundry list of symptoms, maybe 2 to 3 dozen symptoms, everything from the most pertinent for sure was the brain fog, which I could not even hold a conversation. I mean, I would not be able to remember the last sentence that was just being spoken kind of thing, or like forgetting the names of people I know. Pretty crazy stuff. And then, panic attacks and anxiety and feeling like my nervous system was fried all the time. I couldn't only digest about 3 to 4 foods, and I had to constantly rotate them because then I'd get sensitive to those 3 and then I'd have to keep moving along. So it's pretty brutal. I had a lot of skin rashes. I had just a lot of symptoms. And when you get that level of sick that quickly, I don't think there's any other option besides try to find solutions because you can't live your life, right? So I started where everyone else does, which is conventional medicine, going to all the specialists, getting gaslit by, one doctor after another and all sorts of labels thrown my way. And then I pivoted towards kind of trying to explore the natural healing. And I quickly realized that that is a huge maze in of itself. I mean, there's a lot of BS out there. There's a lot of BS diets. There's a lot of BS like magic fixes. And, I just kept running to this cycle where I would try something, I'd feel a little better, and then I'd get worse, right? And I kept feeling like that was pushing me towards, well, what is actually at the bottom of the bucket for me, right? And for me, my life really just completely changed when I encountered detoxification as a whole. And then I encountered mineral balancing as well. And quickly realized like there's a right way to do detox and there's a very wrong way to do detox. And when I was trying to do detox on my own, I screwed myself up big time with like chelation and doing parasite cleansing at the wrong time. But then when I did it in the right order, I had just life-changing results. And so fast forward many years, I was originally trying to study medicine while I was going through the whole, sickness, but I realized like that's a load of BS. So I started just kind of researching and trying to learn from different mentors. And eventually after I healed myself, I just pivoted into, helping others because, it sucks to see the suffering you experienced in other people. I mean, it's pretty brutal and you can't just kind of ignore it.
So what are some of the detoxes that you did that you regret doing? And you mentioned chelation. You probably know I'm a fan of the specific powdered zeolite, but not the nano and stuff. And
sure.
Most people with chelation are probably doing just the normal stuff. I don't know, push catch and
sure,
that sort of stuff.
Little standard stuff. Yeah. I'm with you, by the way, on the zeolites. The nano zeolites I've seen mess a lot of people up, but there's some good zeolites like Zeocharge I know we've talked about before. Zeobind's great too. But so I don't regret anything on my journey. It's all kind of a learning process for sure. Some mistakes were more painful than others, but among the most painful mistakes for sure was trying to do chelation therapy with cilantro and chlorella, right? That just, if I thought I was bad before, that just sent me into outer space where I definitely felt like metals redistributed into my brain and nervous system and just felt this heightening of my consciousness being warped, like you're in this kind of hall of mirrors. You're not actually able to perceive like the light of reality, I suppose. So really brutal stuff. So there was that. I did that with EDTA too, at the wrong time. And I also was not focusing on actually balancing my minerals and rebuilding myself from the ground up. I was really too focused on the getting rid of stuff, right? And so that would just make me feel weaker over time and not actually replace, the good stuff back in. The other place I really ran into issues was parasite cleansing, which for a long time put me off the parasite cleansing completely. And then eventually came back around to it in a more balanced way. But parasites are actually, in my opinion, they serve a really important adaptive role, right? I mean, they are there mainly because of the environmental pollution. There's a lot of good studies to support that. Like if you measure fish in polluted rivers and actually see the parasites within the fish, you'll note that often the heavy metals in the parasites of the fish are hundreds of times higher than the fish themselves. But the thing is, so is the zinc and so is the magnesium as well. So they're, accumulating everything, but they're also stealing a lot. Right? But with that in mind, so I didn't really approach opening my drainage pathways properly or binding or kind of detoxing the low hanging fruit. I just tried to go into a deep parasite cleanse. And, same thing, sent me into outer space and just insane skin reactions and histamine flare-ups and just, it was just absolutely awful. I think those are my two biggest mistakes. Maybe the third mistake would just be, again, not focusing on minerals, right? And really all of this is just about doing things in the right order, which is something I had to learn the painful way. And is something I really try to shortcut for people. So,
yeah. Yeah, I can relate. I've talked about when I was living in an RV and I was the power line was right above my bed and I couldn't move it. It was just one of those situations in life where you can't change the circumstances. And I think above my bed, it was like literally 12 feet, maybe above my head, like a major power line. And so I bought a Magnetico sleep pad on Craigslist. Just I think it was the 10 Gauss, not the 20 Gauss. So they have like 5, 10, and 20. And Dean Bondley, I mean, he was a genius before he passed. I mean, the stuff that he was doing with magnetochelation, if you guys ever want to listen to something while you're eating dinner or something, his lectures on YouTube were great, where he has crazy stories of like basically just increasing the magnetism. Like a girl with holes in her brain from parasites, they literally filled in just by increasing the magnetism. And but it does push metals out because it's giving the cell more energy and the cell could excrete metals. And without taking binders, like I thought about, what you were talking about, I think that kind of messed me up. So now I just sleep on a grounding sheet the same ones I sell. But I think the Magnetico and sleeping on a strong magnetic field is good in context, but someone should probably be on zeolite or some type of thing to to grab those metals as they're coming out, right?
For sure. I'm so surprised that people sometimes don't consider binders in a detox protocol because it just makes things exponentially better. Right? And there's absolutely like, dumb binders, I call them, which is like, diatomaceous earth and activated charcoal, which are kind of maybe okay in short-term stints, but for the most part, they deplete you over time. And then there's the hyper selective binders, which is going to be like the zeolites, but many others like modified citrus pectin and methylated silica like Enteros gel can really just smooth out the journey dramatically. So
yeah, I noticed you've talked about the pectin quite a bit. I played around with it. I think the same product that you mentioned, and maybe I just wasn't consistent enough with it, but that's probably the key with binders is taking them every day, right? If you're on the protocol with them.
For sure. I also think, binders are better at different stages of a person's journey. So some binders are definitely better if you're dealing with more like parasite related issues in the gut, maybe like zeobind. But others are better if you're on a full kind of mineral balancing protocol and you're pushing a lot of metals out. So that's like citrus pectin. It's a really good metal focused one. Also, if you have a lot of biofilms, right, citrus pectin can be really helpful for that too.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the parasites because I've had a few shows on it, and I started my whole journey with raw veganism, which I think a lot of us did.
Same. Yeah.
Green
that was the fourth mistake. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of juicing. And what's cool is I think the enzymes, and I don't know if it was just the life force, my skin did clear up. I did lose some brain fog, but there are definitely levels to it. Right. And I mean, my skin has never been better having the right, animal foods in and stuff. But I wanted to ask your thoughts on like full moon parasite cleansing, because isn't that a philosophy? Like when the moon's approaching full and around that time, that's where they come out to play. So you can hit them hard then. What are your
For
thoughts on
sure.
that whole?
Well, I'm totally a fan, but I think that's more of an advanced thing. Just because, parasites have pretty elaborate life cycles, and there's so many of them. And these life cycles can be weeks, months in length. So for an initial kind of parasite cleanse, first off, you want to do all the groundwork, all the binding, the opening of the drainage, the healing of the gut, the restoring of the liver, the giving the right nutritional support. And then eventually you want to hit it hard, at least in my opinion, for several months to get the bulk of the load down, right? And then I think full moon kind of parasite cleansing makes more sense because then it's more of a maintenance thing. But it is cool, like the science of it, right? Because, during a full moon, serotonin skyrockets, which, is supposed to make us feel good, but then it makes the parasites feel really good too. It makes them frisky and they multiply and they move around. It's also interestingly when melatonin is a lot lower. And melatonin is a phenomenal anti-parasitic on its own, right? I've seen it improve the results of pretty much any parasite cleanse. So
that's really cool. I don't think I was aware of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's such a like true Swiss Army knife for so many different things, mitochondrial support and inflammation and metal detoxification, but the immune benefits of it are insane. In fact, around COVID, the way I wrecked COVID each time was, hyperdosing melatonin 200 to 300 milligrams a night, which is definitely work up to that. Right. But it's good stuff. And, it has a lot of immune balancing properties, not just kind of immune quelling or enhancing. So it can definitely help with a lot of like autoimmunity. It can definitely also help with just, chronic infections that have created a stronghold that your immune system's lost control over. So.
Yeah, I interviewed Russell Ryder, he wrote a book on melatonin decades ago, and that was great. And he's written papers with Doris Lowe, and in her protocol, she uses high dose ascorbic acid with high dose melatonin. But to her, that's a low dose. Like she takes she in her protocol, it's like grams, right? Like 5, 10 grams. But then you have to do the powder. You can't do that in capsule form. And I found that it tastes horrible. Like I tried it sublingual. It was just the worst taste.
Yeah, it's super bad. Yeah. No, I think, it could be really intense, those high doses, like grams, obviously. I mean, they've done safety studies, right? There's no harm besides like drowsiness for people, but it is important to be aware of that high of dose. You can often have a mobilization of a lot of stuff, right? So you definitely want to have a lot of binders on board and a good protocol built around it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, building the foundation. I know with the HTMA people, they're a big fan of, um, as far as detox, maintenance, coffee enemas, and sauna. And I've interviewed people in the field where they think, sauna is more important and you don't need to do daily coffee enemas. And I wonder your thoughts on that, because everyone seems to have a different opinion.
Yeah.
I think the OGs, generally it's everyday coffee enema, everyday sauna, pretty much, right? But to me personally, that's so hard. I mean, if not impossible to fit into my current lifestyle as it stands now. I just don't have enough time in the day to do that currently.
Yeah. 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 I feel you. I mean, there was a day and time where I devoted my entire day to healing, and I would do, 2 to 4 coffee enemas a day, which is insane, but it helped a lot at that time. But honestly, I feel like the sweet spot for most people is just like once to maybe twice a week. I mean, it's reasonable. It's reasonable to fit in. But yeah, coffee enemas. I mean, I'm sure you've talked a lot about it in other episodes. They are a true gem, and it's so random too. So
yeah, well, it seems like one of the most affordable. I mean, assuming someone can get high quality coffee, ideally fresh ground or grind it themselves, right? Clean filtered water. I like the Midolife filter. And then both those things, then the benefits go way up. But it's just one of those super affordable, like instant relief things.
For
And even
sure.
for parasites, I mean, back when I was parasite cleansing,
Mhm.
I don't know if I was seeing tomato skins coming out or if they're, flatworm. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Saw a lot of
for
crazy stuff come out.
for sure. Yeah, people see a lot of stuff with that. Yeah, there's the ones that are questionable, like is that an undigested piece of corn,
Mhm.
and then there's ones that are undeniable, which is the big boys. And I would say at 9 out of 10 of my clients, at some point they see something come out of them, and that's definitely some sort of spiritual awakening, because it's like, wow, I have had this in my colon my entire life, like stealing my nutrients and my life force. And so it's definitely pretty eye opening.
What are your thoughts on colonics? I've only ever done one, but colon hydrotherapy, as far as like a hard reset, like the woman that helps me on the mountain here, she's dealing with like IBS and severe gut issues. I'm going to start to help her once she's moved up here with her boyfriend. And I was kind of playing with the idea of, I mean, definitely getting her on enemas,
Yeah.
either ozone or coffee or both.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if colonic would be good for her too. What do you think about that as far as like just an initial like hard reset?
Yeah. Colonics are awesome.
Mm.
Anything you can do to kind of move the bowels is going to speed up detoxification, just because really the main exit point for most metals, pesticides, chemicals, metabolic toxins is going to be from the cell into the lymphatics, lymphatics into the liver into the colon, right? That's the main way. Many reasons why, the colon, like the lining, renews itself every 3 days. It has way more surface area than our kidneys. And then our kidneys also, if you push things out through there, they tend to get real, it's not a fun time. I'll just leave it at that. So absolutely, whatever you can do to move your bowels more. I mean, most indigenous tribes, they pooped after every meal. So in my opinion, if you are pooping, even once a day, you're still constipated. You should be 2 to 3 times a day. That is when people feel amazing, because everything's moving. So early on, for sure, if you're having a lot of gut issues, colon cleansing, like colonics are phenomenal. The coffee enemas, you can just get a lot of the benefits at home. Especially during a parasite cleanse, that can be just life-changing for people if you just are really kind of keeping everything moving. Now, on something on the gut issues part of things, which is probably might as well bring it up since we're mentioning that. Probably one of the biggest causes of gut issues, which for me personally and for many people I'm seeing, is the pesticide load, and very specifically glyphosate. Just because you find it in 85 to 90% of people's urine. And in my opinion, that 10 to 15%, they are just not excreting the glyphosate. It's probably accumulating within them. And glyphosate is well documented to do a lot of really screwed up things, like nuke our microbiome for the most part and encourage a lot of pathogenic microbes. Also steals a lot of our minerals. But it's also a kind of hidden cause of gluten intolerance. Interestingly, there is this correlation between celiac disease and gluten intolerance, and when glyphosate was introduced to the food supply. And anecdotally, both my own experience and what I've seen is when I cleaned up a lot of the glyphosate with things like fulvic humic acids, like Shilajit, I was able to eliminate my gluten intolerance, which was just the most amazing thing ever to be able to have a burger and not, trip about it for a week.
Yeah.
Because it used to be literally, one bite of gluten would, send me for a terrible reaction for a good like week to 2 weeks. So definitely the pesticide load is a big thing to consider whenever there's gut issues, and it's typically one of the first things I address. So the Shilajit's great for that. There's other good fulvic humics too, like Ion Gut Support, Zach Bush's product I really like, and there's others too.
Hmm. Yeah, it's great tips. What about the opposite? Like you talked about constipation. What if someone has like loose stools? What's kind of where's the starting point there for you?
For sure, binders can help a lot with that. Typically, the diarrhea is more of a, your body's just trying to get rid of something, right? It could be like an ongoing like endotoxin from some sort of pathogen in there. Could also just be like, I see it a lot when people get their gallbladder removed. They tend to start getting a lot of loose stools and they're just not processing their fat properly. So it could be a lot of different reasons, but typically, good binders and also cleaning up the pesticides tend to fix some of that. And then when you actually get into a good pathogen cleanse, at the right time with the right mineral base, can definitely resolve a lot of that too.
What are your thoughts on like the whole bile conversation? Like I'm gonna have a show on it, I think next week, and I've never done a liver flush, but I know a lot of people swear by those, and even just the whole bile concept of supporting it with digestive bitters and
Sure.
stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, bile is so underrated for sure. I mean, it's one of the main things that keeps our small intestines microbial balance. It's one of the main ways our liver excretes toxins is always going to be through that bile. And so, for example, the whole push catch thing that you alluded to earlier, right, which is like Chris Shade's thing, which is really consists about taking bitters to move the bile and having binders there ready to kind of bind up whatever's there. One of the big arguments for binders is this thing called enterohepatic circulation, which is where you are pushing that bile down. And because there's no binders on board to soak up the toxins, the bile naturally tends to get reabsorbed in this very efficient process, but so do the toxins. Right? And so by taking binders, you can kind of interrupt that and stop putting so much stress on your detox pathways. But yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many ways to support bile. I love phosphatidylcholine and just choline from food as well. So pasture raised eggs and all that, and a good liver supplement as well is really good. But yeah, a lot of different ways to support it.
Yeah. Yeah. I had Karen Hurd on, I think it was like a year ago, and she has like the bean diet. And I don't think Ray Pete was pro beans, but, it was all about the fiber binding. And, Ray Pete had the raw carrot, and she really promoted beans with every meal or several times a day. And also to lower adrenaline. To me, that fiber and stress lowering connection is really fascinating to me.
For sure. Yeah, fiber is pretty important. But like in this space, every rule has an exception, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because I find some people are super sensitive to lectins and they can't handle beans, but most people are fine. And then other people it's oxalates. And it's just, I think if you are venture in the space long enough, at least I have learned to just kind of keep everything with kind of a loose grip because I may be proven wrong the very next day.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Yeah, humbling. Well, I wanted to talk about EMFs because that's something that is always on my mind. And I think that's part of why I moved up here to North Idaho, we're talking about before I hit record, just to be more in nature and more outside of the city. I'm really sensitive. I don't do well being in a population dense area for a while.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's the multiple Wi-Fi signals or the towers or who knows, the combination of, I mean, it's a smorgasbord, right? Of unnatural new energies that we're getting exposed to. But lately I've been revisiting like the green wave, Kim Lear, I had on the show, and the dirty electricity or electromagnetic interference stuff coming out of the wiring in the walls. And there's so many different types of EMF, right? That I think people get lost. And a common question I get is, what should I buy? What device? And, even though I like Blue Shield and some of that stuff, it's like, that's down the line. Like,
Yeah.
like I always say, like first support with melatonin, vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc. I mean, even selenium. There's so many nutrients that help protect you from EMFs, right? But and if someone's deficient in those, I mean, is it worth doing other stuff before supporting that foundation?
Mhm. For sure. I mean, like you said earlier, there's so much free stuff that you can do that can be super high leverage. And then, you can kind of, well, how fast do you want to heal? Do you want to be on a bicycle? Do you want to
Yeah.
be in a car? Do you want to be on an airplane? That's kind of, up to you and your budget. Right.
Mhm.
But with EMFs, there's so many, again, like high leverage moves. And really it's something that is probably one of the biggest roadblocks I see that is keeping people stuck from healing. And it's either from the obsession and fear around it, which is also showing up in many different areas of their lives, or it's just that they are inundated in it because they are on their computers 24/7. They're on their phones when they're not on their computers, and they're indoors and they're not getting any sunlight. And so their mitochondria is completely fried, just excreting all its ATP, and there's no energy for them to actually heal themselves. So EMFs are, really that's just referring to anything that's man-made. And the idea there is that they just weren't tested for safety. And they do definitely, it's a good amount of evidence, especially the dirty electricity stuff, but also, a lot of the cell phone frequencies, they are well tested and shown to have different biological effects through a variety of mechanisms. But in the context of detox, it's really important to know that if you reduce EMFs in like ways I'm going to mention in a second, generally it's a lot easier to excrete heavy metals. I think Dr. Klinghardt was one who did a kind of smaller study with autistic children, and one group had EMF reduction, right? All the steps in place to do that, and then the other group didn't. And they generally found with the same detox protocol that these kids who reduced EMFs had way higher levels of heavy metals coming out in their urine, right? So definitely there's something to be said about that. But another thing too is that, you know, mold, for example, is a big topic in the detox community and in the natural health community. But there's so much mold in nature that it only seems to be kind of a recent thing that's created this, this epidemic of mold and biotoxin illness. And one of the main reasons why is because under stress of EMFs, they excrete hundreds of times more mycotoxins, right? And so the same thing is happening both externally and internally with the different fungi that are within us and the different microbes that could be well integrated into our microbiome. They instead get, stress responses from the EMFs and excrete biotoxins, and creates all this chaos within. Um, yeah, so there's that, and then of course there's the actual, reduction of melatonin, which melatonin is, if there's no magic pill in this space, but I think melatonin is as close to that as we can get. Just because everyone's subclinically deficient in melatonin, really, just because of all the non-native EMFs, and then there's the fluoride and the aluminum and the glyphosate and all that impacts our melatonin production. So yeah, super high leverage stuff, and people again don't really put enough energy into it just because they can't see it, and some people can't feel it. But totally an important part of really, I think, any good healing program. Now, simple high leverage things, in my opinion, right? Going from probably the cheapest to, more expensive stuff. Just turn your Wi-Fi off at night, for God's sake. Just please, just at night, just unplug it. Or even better, you can get a timer from Amazon and just set it so, at 11 p.m., it turns off automatically. 8 a.m., it turns back on. It's way more impactful, the EMFs, while you're sleeping versus when you're awake. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing person can do is actually just through their circuit breaker, they could just turn off the power to their room or to their house, right? And just cut all electricity flowing through the wiring. That is a super high leverage move. And that I've seen it improve people's sleep dramatically, just that move. And then of course there's the other things like, be mindful of your cell phone usage, right? Definitely try to, whenever you want to have focus hours, just put it on airplane mode and leave it in another room, or just don't carry it on you. Like for me, it's crazy that people will carry it in their pockets right next to their genitalia. And it's just, I just can't even believe it. So there's that. And then of course you want to also try to get electrons back from the earth. So just go outside, right? I mean, there's a meme I saw where it was like, oh Lord, you're giving me the toughest battles.
Yes.
What do I have to do? Like, give me salvation. And then it was like Jesus, and he's like, just go outside.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's so good, but it's so true. So,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah, those are great tips. Brian Hoyer lives up here, and I had him on the show, Shielded Healing, and I want to get him to the house and film some content because he has all the meters and knows how to use them. I have a lot of meters. I'm not an expert on how to use them yet, but he like these little laptop. It's going to be
oh yeah.
audio for most people, but there's no grounding prong on your laptop. USB adapter, and I think most people are using like the little Mac laptops. And so he just came out with one that's grounded, and you basically only get exposed to DC electricity instead of AC, and no electric field or minimal. I think that's a huge source too, when you just have your hands on the keyboard of a laptop that's
Yeah.
not grounded in the wall, right?
For sure. Yeah, I've done some testing with a little Acousticom. The levels when it's plugged in, so much higher than when it's just kind of not plugged in. Same thing with our cell phones too. It goes off the charts. Also, same thing with Teslas. In my opinion, I don't think Teslas are safe for people to drive. People may hate on me for that. Whatever, they go fast, great, awesome, 0 to 60. But it's, the electromagnetic field is so strong in there. And I kind of tested it. And I've also seen a lot of reports of people getting a lot of symptoms from driving their Teslas all the time. What it feels like personally when I drive in a Tesla and take even like an hour and a half road trip, because my wife has a Tesla, is that it feels like you're in an airplane, right? Because the airplane is also kind of this like Faraday cage of concentrating EMFs, and you get this kind of ungrounded, disoriented feeling when you get out. And same thing as this, as I would experience in driving a Tesla, right? So I want to go kind of a little level above in terms of EMF protection tips, right? So the next step, besides all that free stuff that I mentioned, is to get a cover. So lessemf.com has like a really good shielding, a lot of shielding supplies in general, like shielding for your phones and like, pads for your laptop. So you don't like directly, if you put it on your lap, it's called a laptop, right? You can actually shield it because it's wise not to have it directly on your lap for obvious reasons. So they have stuff like that. But the main one is they have a good extra strength cover that I've tested personally, and it reduces the output of Wi-Fi dramatically because it's so grossly overpowered, the routers at home. I mean, I put this heavy duty thing in and I test it and see how much the levels go down, and I still could be on the other side of the house and get good signal. So it's pretty intense. The other thing is the dirty electricity thing that you mentioned. It's definitely a game changer. It's not my field of expertise, but I will say I've seen it be really helpful for people as well. Yeah. And then I'll mention kind of one more thing on this whole thing. So I'm saying all this just because I don't also want people to start getting, skittish and afraid and like walking around the city and getting afraid because they're getting irritated from all the EMFs. Really, it's about like, how do you return to a state of resilience to all stressors, right? And I think that's what real health is. It isn't, taking 20 supplements a day just to feel somewhat okay and then still on this kind of up and down roller coaster. It's more like you don't need anything. The supplements you take are just making you feel even better, right? And you're also able to handle the stressors of life, whether it's running a business or going on adventures, or having great relationships or just doing things for the world. Right. And that same thing applies to Wi-Fi. Right. And one of the main ways to improve your resilience to Wi-Fi is to detox, actually, because the heavy metals in a person's system, they get rattled around by the Wi-Fi. Right. And so I have seen a good amount of cases when you detoxify people to a great degree, especially aluminum, since people are so toxic in aluminum, they tend to have a elimination of their EMF sensitivity. And that was the case for me too. I mean, anytime I was around Wi-Fi, I had felt this kind of this staticky feeling, like all my senses were staticky, like even me and my own thoughts were staticky. That was kind of my normal, but it would get a lot worse around Wi-Fi. And right now, I mean, I'm right next to my Wi-Fi router and I still feel pretty damn good. So
have you seen in clients with tattoos, like, because I know those contain metals, right? I think they make non-metal tattoo materials, but have you seen that connection happen with tattoos and Wi-Fi and EMFs becoming basically an antenna?
Interesting. Yeah. I haven't paid attention to that because I see a lot of people virtually, so I don't know what tattoos they have. but that's something I'll definitely pay more attention to. Absolutely, the tattoos thing is a big deal, especially if you get like colored tattoos. Like the red dye is typically just mercury.
Wow.
So it's good, if you're going to get a tattoo, definitely, try to find someone who's conscious and aware of the whole health space.
Yeah. Yeah. You can get so crazy with that. I've seen people even talk about, I mean, belly button piercings. I don't know the reasoning. I guess people just get super, trying to do an aesthetic look or something, but earrings, I mean, any kind of metal will pull a signal to it, right?
For
So if
sure.
those are
For sure.
placed by your head, or you think about nose rings and lip, I mean, people have piercings everywhere, right? So it's
Yeah. Yeah.
probably bringing it to those areas.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's just essentially how metallic do you want to be as a person? Do you want to be half robot, or do you want to be do you want to be a human being? So,
Yeah.
definitely
It's
things to
funny
think
what you
about.
said about the Teslas, because I have electric snowmobile, electric UTV, and I think it's, the resilience piece that you mentioned. That's what I felt, because I do hear that from people, like they can't even ride an EV for a short amount of time, and I haven't noticed any effect. Then again, I need to remeasure my testosterone. It's been years, because
Mhm.
that would be one of the tells, right? If my testosterone tanked after
For
after
sure.
using one consistently.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting connection. Just
But
the testosterone EMF stuff. Yeah.
yeah, I know it's mostly when you charge. Like
Yeah.
I think Mercola and I forget who's the genetic guy. Um, he's up here in the PNW. I think it's mostly when the EVs are charging. That's where it's emitting the highest
For sure.
field,
For
the
sure.
strongest. But
Yeah. Knowledge is power. Just, if you have one, just get out of the car while it's charging, go get a
absolutely,
coffee or something, preferably organic.
yeah. Or just get a Porsche or something. No.
Yeah. Get a Porsche. Yeah, for sure. Everyone just get a Porsche. That's it.
um, see where, well, I guess now since we brought up testosterone, do you want to kind of go into that? And there's the EMF connection with it, and also the microplastics. I mean, I've heard, someone was just telling me the other day, that was on the mountain here. He's like, oh yeah, it's my electrician, I think. He was like, I've heard that a person consumes like an average of like a credit card amount of plastic. Was it every year or
Yeah.
every
It's
few
every
years or
week,
something?
actually.
Every week.
The week. Yeah. It's 5 grams of plastic per week. So, yeah, I saw like a visualization. It's like every year, it's like this huge bowl of plastic, right? Just plastic beads. Yeah. And you can find it in pretty much all men's balls, like high amounts of microplastics, and women's breasts. It's kind of everywhere. So like people are partially metallic and people are partially plastic, which is pretty crazy to think about. But these toxins like metals and plastics and a lot of the pesticides, right? One of the main things that they do, right? Yeah, they impact the nervous system a lot, but they impact the endocrine system, right? Quite a lot. I mean, heavy metals really can tank your testosterone, right? I mean, there's good research on that, like lead and mercury, what that can do to your testosterone, how it displaces your beneficial minerals. But personally, with microplastics, there is good research on that too. And just doing some simple high leverage things in terms of reducing your exposures to microplastics, things you wouldn't really think about, has like dramatically improved my own testosterone, which has been pretty awesome. And there's a few little tips too to actually improve the detoxification of them, right? So the main thing is like there's some of the binders are really good for actually binding microplastics. And something to think about microplastics too is that they tend to absorb other toxins within them, tend to actually like have chemicals or heavy metals attached to them. So a lot of the detox kind of tends to overlap, right? So zeolite can be great for that. The main one that the research kind of supports is chlorella, which I would consider a more advanced binder. And there's only one single brand that I trust, which is BioPure personally. I mean,
Okay, yeah.
I'm sure there's other good brands out there, but BioPure I know is held to really high standards, and I've seen it work a lot better than some of the other ones. People try to cheap out, and it pisses me off because you need to kind of invest in the good binders. So that can definitely bind to microplastics. But another really good one, cruciferous vegetables have different compounds that accelerate the metabolism of these microplastics, and in particular, there's one compound which is a diindolylmethane, so DIM, right? A lot of people take it as a supplement for like hormonal balancing. And, part of it is like it's going to eliminate some microplastics, but it also helps process a lot of toxic forms of estrogen. So that's a really fantastic testosterone booster for people. In my opinion, the liposomal form works a lot better. So that's like Chris Shade's like Quilksover liposomal dim. Yeah, it's an absolute game changer in that regard. I've seen it do some really dramatic stuff. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just bought artichoke seeds and a bunch of seeds from my garden, and I'm so happy to basically create my own medicinal compounds here at home. That's the best thing.
For
So,
sure. It's powerful stuff.
yeah, the pyrandosa from BioPure. I was taking that years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know why. I was just playing with it. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'll have to try that again. That's really good to know. And
Yeah.
what do you think about just regular sauna? Is there evidence that reduces the plastics come out of our skin? I used to do gua sha, before it was cool. I mean, it was
Yeah.
like 2011, 2012.
For
And
sure.
I saw some weird stuff. I mean, it was dark, thick, but who knows what it was, but
Yeah.
some different colored stuff was coming out of my pores.
For sure. Yeah. Well, it's just massaging the lymph, give it a little love. People's lymph tends to be pretty blocked up. Yeah, I skipped over. You had mentioned the sauna thing earlier. I love regular sauna use. There's a lot of great evidence for longevity, right? There's that Finnish study with Finnish men who just the more they use the sauna, the longer they lived, right? So the less their chance of dying from absolutely everything, which is pretty nice, I would say. But sauna therapy, I don't think is tolerated by everyone. I mean, I work my patient population is like really sensitive for the most part, so they often don't tolerate much sauna at all at the beginning. You have to kind of really work them up to it. But as a general detox tool, I would say that's probably the most powerful out of everything, just because it is so broad what it can help you eliminate, like heavy metals. And I think I've seen some studies on microplastics as well, but then the pesticides and the chemicals, it's going to mobilize everything, right? It also helps kind of liquefy your lymph, right? So it can help that circulation. So it's really, really good. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't read too much into the science of like microplastics out through the skin. So definitely
Yeah.
something I'll look into more.
Yeah, I found too, like I had I mean, when you're on this journey, I'm sure you can relate. Like you have weird stuff that comes up. Like I had like clogged ears for the last year, and I don't know if it was stress related or what, but I would wake up where one ear is blocked, and sometimes it'd be severe where I'd have to pour in like hydrogen peroxide and have it bubble or something. But I found that now that I'm back in the sauna, it like melted it, and now
Yeah,
I never wake up with clogged ears because I guess it just loosened up the wax or whatever. But I don't know
for
if that
sure.
was caused by the zeolite or whatever I'm doing or stress, but you have
Could be. I
things.
mean, who knows what it could be. There is something that happens with detox because I know you've been kind of on this like metal detox journey for a while too. The elimination of heavy metals, like these pockets of heavy metals throughout our body, and just any kind of real like toxin that's accumulated in a certain area, those are often typically where the pathogens are too. They kind of love to set up house. So once you kind of pull away their fortress, then it starts becoming this kind of ongoing battle between your immune system and them, which for me is why I brought back parasite cleansing into my detox protocols, which I had like eliminated for a while due to my own experiences. But once I brought it back in the right way, it would help people move through those kind of immune flare ups a lot more quickly. But yeah, so it could be that. Could also just be, blocked lymphatic drainage from the head downwards. That's really common for people, whether it's like structural imbalances or, people's melatonin levels are just absolutely tanked. And so the lymphatic system doesn't work properly. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, it could be a lymph thing. Yeah, I mean, I've been so busy the last year. I haven't been moving as much as I'd like. Even living rural, you walk and stuff. But I just set up an inversion swing last night and I think I've logged only like 10 minutes of using it hanging upside down. And that alone, I feel like it's already made a huge difference. Like it's already reorienting my whole nervous system and stuff. And I heard a theory years ago is from a detox coach that it's like the things settle at our feet. So when you go inverted, have you heard that it kind
Yeah,
of
for sure.
Mercury, especially or something with the weight of it, it kind of can push it around. And
Yeah.
have you
Yeah.
played around with inverting and
I love inverting. I
layups?
mean, I personally just do just lay down and have my legs kind of sitting
Yeah.
up, right? But yeah, definitely the lymph blockages can be really interesting because sometimes it's easy to go really high on the supplements and the mobilizing and stuff, and you kind of run into this feeling of I feel heavy,
Mhm.
I feel kind of like tired and anxious, and I don't really know why. And sometimes all you really need to do is just move your lymphatics, and inversion's amazing for that. I also like something called the Big Six lymphatic reset. So these are like a series of exercises from this physiotherapist, which you're just kind of massaging the different major lymph nodes and lymph points, and then you bounce on your heels for a while, and that can really help circulate things, right? Because our calves kind of work almost like a pump for our lymphatics too. So
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Well, going back to the pathogens hiding with the metals, have you played around with ozone? Because I did a round of rectal ozone gas, and it seemed really powerful, like the effects of those ozonides and
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. The research is really deep on ozone. I mean, it's crazy. It's kind of there's so much to it. I actually haven't dived into it fully, but yeah, I have seen some good stuff with ozone. I just think it's kind of like a right time, right thing.
yeah,
A right thing, right time kind of thing.
yeah.
So I imagine for you, you're already kind of like in good, robust health, but I've also seen it like mess people up big time. What I think is really cool is the ozonated oils. So like ozonated olive oil and ozonated kind of essential oils of other things. So like BioPure has a few mixtures, but there's other companies that do like different ozone preparations. That could be a really powerful tool. I call that kind of like the parasite nuke, really. I don't think everyone needs to go that intense, but it can be pretty powerful. Also, I've seen good things with just getting an ozone generator, kind of just
Mhm.
ozonating your own oils and your own water. That can be pretty helpful. But again, it's an oxidant, right? And
Yeah.
generally, you're going to break things apart and release things. And so you definitely want to make sure, again, your drainage pathways are good and you're binding well and you're pooping well and you're moving well. All that.
Absolutely. While we're talking about critters, we kind of mentioned before the show, like I told you about my cigar, my love for cigars, and I always have a humidor stocked back here, and I generally do one a day, and it's funny, I've had Scott Share on the show, and they put nicotine in their trochees, and uh, feels like almost every week he's like, smoking is bad, no one should be smoking. But then they always talk about conventional cigarettes and even American spirits, I think, are junk.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like real tobacco, just the leaves, I mean, I've grown this stuff. You just the leaves wrapped up, tightly. Cigar. Yes, there's things released when it burns, and yes, you get a dose of cadmium, right? Because tobacco has an affinity for cadmium in
For
the
sure.
soil. But I think the benefits outweigh the detriment. And if you're taking care of your oral health, your lungs, and you're on vitamin C and vitamin E, which are really the antidote for smokers, and then you just stack onto that melatonin and all the stuff we've been talking about, I feel like it's a great ally. And I don't know what your opinion is on like nanotech, and that gets really out there, and people call it conspiracy, but I
Yeah.
mean, to me, it makes sense that they would, whatever is being sprayed in the sky, there's some weird stuff in there beyond just metals.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a crazy rabbit hole for sure. I will say something on that real quick. So the nicotine actually surprisingly powerful medicinal tool, especially for like long COVID. So
Mhm.
like really like low dose. That's definitely something, work with your practitioner, work with your doctor on, right? But so that's definitely can be really helpful in that case. And I've also it's a really awesome nootropic. Like let's just be real, it can really help you kind of bust out a really good work day. So it's all about like what cost and benefit, right?
Yeah.
So, but in terms of the spraying of the skies, that's probably our main source of aluminum exposure, actually. And the real reason why I could say that is because if you see the studies on snow and rain and soil analysis, you just find just insanely high levels of aluminum. I've also been doing hair testing for many years, like hair mineral analysis. And the most common toxin I find in pretty much everyone is aluminum. Like it's off the charts in everyone. I could literally go through my client files right now and not find. There's like one person I've ever seen not have it high, and they had it come out later on once they got on a detox program. So it's impacting everyone, right? And the whole nanotech thing is kind of who it's quite a deep rabbit hole. There's the whole like dark field
Hmm.
microscopy thing. But the main thing is, even within that community, that nanotech is made of plastic and metals, right? And so it's going to generally respond to the same things. And also like the whole graphene oxide thing. Well, fulvic humic, well researched to help eliminate graphene. So, get your shilajit in, should be good to go, right? But it's definitely, it feels like there is, if I were just to say something very out there, because why not? It feels like there is a certain kind of push to integrate people into this digital world, right? And essentially disconnect them from like what it means to be human. And that
Yep.
relates to the whole depersonalization thing that I experienced because when I was sick, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what a flow state with me expressing myself looked like. Right. I was always trapped on, second gear, but I was also like unable to just like really express myself in anything, conversation or artistically or any of that. Right. It was just this really weird disconnection from who I actually was, right? And so they call that depersonalization, something that typically kind of lines up with brain fog. And what I find is that heavy metals essentially do that. They kind of like warp a person's consciousness, right? They make them not feel like themselves. And I mean, even like lead has been well studied that when they added lead to gasoline, they had a massive spike in antisocial behavior and juvenile kind of behavior, and then spike in murders and all sorts of other stuff, right? So it seems to kind of warp and bring out the worst in humanity. There's the whole theory on the Roman Empire, the elites consuming lead because they just love to sweeten their wine with it and they love to use lead pipes, and then it made them go crazy and it led to their downfall. That's a very fun theory to entertain, but and there's also the whole thing with like mercury, like the Mad Hatters, right? So the people who were making hats, they used a lot of mercury and they made them go essentially insane, right? And it's crazy to see like these kind of personality things, trends kind of track depending on a person's toxicity. For example, something I see happen a lot when a person has a high mercury burden, typically from like amalgam fillings that they had as a kid or their mom did, or even just from vaccinations and that kind of thing. Um, they tend to have a really shy disposition, a very introverted disposition, and also a very kind of their mind races, but they're not kind of able to express it in a grounded way, right? Which typically clears up with mercury. So yeah, I feel like this whole healing journey is a lot more than just kind of feeling good or getting rid of your symptoms. I think the deepest levels of it is how do you reconnect to the deepest parts of you? Because these junk and these toxins are just kind of clogging up like mud on a lamp. And you cleaning it off is just about you kind of becoming who you are. I definitely feel again, there's this weird kind of concerted push to kind of push people into this, tech version of themselves that isn't really them. Because when people are truly themselves and feel great and vital, they are forced to be reckoned with and can't be controlled quite easily.
I love it. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, I can relate with the being stuck in a lower gear. Like I remember just feeling like I wasn't experiencing my full potential mentally, and I wanted to help people. And this is when I first started Mito Life and was selling, magnesium bicarbonate under the table and stuff. And it was from the detox that I was able to get clear enough to realize, oh, here's how I can start helping people and then supporting myself to get out of the matrix financially. And that's kind of the inspiration that I try to keep giving people, because I think a lot of people like feel stuck, especially like financially. And it's like, there's so many things for people to create that doesn't exist, but you need to have a clear mind to see the gaps, right?
For sure. For sure. I even think a lot of the kind of black and white thinking that people have is to do with neuroinflammation because it's a very kind of energy lazy way of thinking, right? To not consider things in a very multidimensional way. And I just kind of reflect on how I felt. I was very black and white in the way I saw the world and the way I saw my relationships. And, detoxification really led me to experience this beautiful multidimensionalness of like what it is to have a functioning human brain. right? We can actually, creatively problem solve in many different ways. And that ends up showing up in people's lives. Like instead of feeling like they are stuck and this is the only way, people can kind of creatively create a new path for themselves. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely. Yeah, I like that you're bringing this up, that it's way more than just feeling good and the physical aspect to it, because we're not just physical robots, right? We have emotions and uh, energy body, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, there's a lot to do there. I wanted to ask you, have you? I think I did see you talk to Jeff Leone. Have you played around with the spectrophotometry and the oligoscan stuff?
the illegal scan somewhat. I mainly have
Okay.
kind of stuck around HTMA. So I don't have enough kind of uh, research, I suppose, or just seeing like the associations to draw connections between the two. But I think it's a super fascinating tool for sure. And it typically does line up with the toxicities that I see. Right? Typically, like, people drink tap water, you see high fluoride, right? Which I don't know if you definitely should get a water filter if you haven't already. And then of course like high aluminum and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, oligoscan is a super cool tool. I think it's just so fascinating. You can just get all that just from your hands. It's a really
Yeah.
interesting piece of technology. Yeah.
Yeah, at home too. I'm still wrapping my head around how to read it, because it's similar to the HTMA, where it's counterintuitive. Like
Yeah.
when you see something go down, that's, I mean, you want to see things go up, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's because
Mm-hmm.
that means that you're getting rid of it. So,
For sure.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, I'm overdue for an HTMA. I keep forgetting every time I go into Great Clips to get my haircut to bring the little scale, and I guess I could just put it in an envelope or something and
Yeah,
bring it
for sure.
home. But
Do you usually
yeah.
do like ARL? Do you do like what laboratory you usually work with?
I think I've been bouncing between both of those, ARL and what's the
And
other one?
trace elements.
Trace Elements. Yeah.
Yeah. Trace elements is cool that it has so many other things that you can test
Mhm.
for, like the uranium too, which, radiation, really common in California, actually. So I live over in California, and there's a lot of specific exposures over here that you don't really see as much in other parts of the US. So it's kind of pretty brutal.
Yeah, someone was asking me about my underground bunker that I'm building, and radon, if I tested up here for radon yet.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's more of a situational thing, right? Is it everywhere, or I feel like it's like, I think it was an issue when I lived in Colorado on Conifer, but
Yeah.
from my understanding, it's not like it's everywhere. It's in kind of pockets.
Yeah. Yeah. It just depends on the landscape. It's good to get
Hmm.
your house radon tested, though, for sure. And
Hmm.
then, then there's the binders. If you pick a good binder, you'll cover a lot of things all at
Yeah.
once, right? And same with the full vacuuming, right? So it's nice to have tools that do a lot of things at once because it simplifies a person's practice for sure.
Yeah.
Like vitamin E can do so many different things, and melatonin can do so many different things. Binders can do so many different things. Supporting your
Hmm.
liver can do a lot of different things, right? For example, like even cleaning up your viral load. Like you'd be surprised how much supporting your liver can help you get over a flu, right? So
Do you I think I asked you about bitters earlier. Do you take, like, with your parasite protocol, is that part of it?
yeah,
Do you
so
do those with it?
I could kind of like segue more into just kind of how I'm approaching work with people right now in terms of
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
step by step stuff. So this, mind you, this is all stuff I just kind of had to learn through experience and just through like studying and working under people and getting mentored under kind
Hmm.
of how do you approach detox safely? Because there's a lot of mistakes and a lot of ways you can really screw it up. So I just want to kind of touch on some of the most important so
Yeah.
people don't, naively go into a detox protocol and screw themselves up. So the main thing is just to do things in the right order, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And that is typically, again, in my opinion, starting with the colon, right? So people's colon is typically filled with a lot of impacted mucus and fecal matter. I mean, just a lot of really gross stuff. And they also tend to have a high amount of pesticides that's destroying the microbiome. And they also tend to have a lot of leaky gut, right? So that's kind of this intestinal permeability that causes, undigested food proteins to circulate. Then they have neuroinflammation, leaky brain, and all that other stuff. So really focusing on the gut first and foremost can be one of the most pivotal things you can do to smooth out absolutely any healing program you do. For me, how I'm approaching that now, right? Intestinal binders do a great job of that. I like zeobinds, right, which is a larger particle size zeolite, stays in the colon. The zeocharge is fantastic for more systemic detox, but the zeobind is more of like a colon based zeolite, so it could be really good for that leaky gut. Also like that methylated silica, that Enteris gel, right? It's really good. It's marketed for IBS and studied for it, but it can be a really good broad spectrum binder in the colon.
What's
Um,
that one?
and Enteris gel, yeah.
Terrace
So
gel.
it's
Okay,
a it's a
interesting.
Russian made product that's yeah, it has its own research, again, mainly for IBS, but it's a really well tolerated binder generally. Of course, none
Wow.
of this is medical advice. I will just preface all that by saying this, right? Um, so for the colon as well, something I really have become a big fan of is something called a Zen cleanse, right? Which I don't know
Mm.
if you've heard of before.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, cool. Have you
Hmm.
done one before?
I haven't. No, my friend
Yeah,
Bob, yeah, posted it, and I just glanced on the website. But I'm
yeah,
such a, having a supplement company, I'm so judgmental that
sure.
when I see a website and it's a lot of reviews and not a lot of
Mm-hmm.
info, I just click away. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not saying it's bad. It's just,
For
yeah,
sure.
I'm very hardcore when I give a website 10 seconds, then I click out.
Yeah. Well, you got to have you have to have your skeptic filter on all the time in this world for sure. Well, the main thing is, that mucoid plaque phenomena is something that has been well documented for a long time. Like people have this weird ropey material that has all sorts
Yeah.
of garbage in it, and people feel better when it comes out. That's the main thing. That's just like, do you want it in you? Do you want it out? Right. It's been quite a mission to get it out of people for a long time, and typically involved like some pretty long fasts and a lot of usage of binders over a long period of time. But Zen Cleanse is kind of this fermented enzyme product. It's this Tibetan recipe where they're essentially fermenting these fruits and vegetables, mushrooms and herbs for about 3 years in this big vat, and they're blasting Tibetan sutras on it. And so they come in like little Pac-Man, and they can, depending on which one you choose, will help kind of break apart that mucus and old kind of materials. You get a lot of the benefits of like fasting and such.
Mm.
So the main one I typically focus on for people is the Zen Cleanse 1, which is the one for the colon. And that one can clear out a lot of that mucoid plaque stuff, right? Which, some people argue, is it the vials themselves with the fermented fruits, vegetables, and all that stuff? Could be, but also people feel better when it comes out. So I just kind of go in that direction, right? I've seen some pretty dramatic results with that. But so that's a good one. And then of course, like the pesticide load has to be addressed, right? Which is
Mm.
like glyphosate. That is all the other pesticides too, but I'm just mainly kind of singling out glyphosate because it's the most common one. And it's probably one of the most damaging ones too, which, again, good high quality fulvic humic can really take care of that. So starting there, then moving into like liver rejuvenation, right? Which is talking about the bile flow and how do you optimize that? How do you optimize phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 liver detox? It's all about kind of approaching it nutritionally. And then, bitters can be really good too. I like Chris Shade's products like Bitters X and Bitters number 9, because it has these herbs mixed with phosphatidylcholine. Could be really helpful. People really like Tutka. Tutka's awesome in my opinion. Does a lot of stuff. So you kind of are working in that order, like gut, liver, then lymphatics as well, and you're opening the drainage pathway so things can come out smoothly, right? And then a parasite cleanse can be in order, right? Once you have
Mhm.
also kind of brought in a good amount of minerals to make sure people have, for example, if you're really, really low in zinc, your immune system will not have essentially weaponry to take care of the pathogens, right? So optimizing that as well can be really helpful in making a parasite cleanse go really smoothly. Um, and then typically, the way I'm approaching it now is you want to go large to small, right?
Mm.
So you want to go for the big kind of scrubber type parasite products, which is like Mimosa pudica. Uh, that will typically kind of pull the bigger ones out. And the thing is, the larger ones tend to have all the smaller ones in them too. They tend to have like the mold and the candida and the different bacterium and different viruses within them. And then you kind of approaching it that way, you can get rid of the big life rafts first and then go smaller, 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 more and more intracellular. And then I find typically finish things off with high dose mineral balancing. And that can be a lot of fun for people. So,
Have you ever played around with tree resins? And not only turpentine, there's other ones like the Shen Blossom cells, but I played around with turpentine back in the
yeah,
day, and I'm
sure.
still on the fence. I mean, that's in the same time where they were using like kerosene in the
Yeah.
South, like a detox.
Good times, good times. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, turpentine I know is a powerful tool. It's just one of those things that it can go wrong, by going too high of a dose. So I typically just stay away from it. Right.
Yeah.
So, definitely something to be very cautious with.
Yeah. Yeah. I was doing the sugar cubes. I would stack them,
Yeah.
and do the
Grandma's
drops on it.
recipe. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. Well, it's interesting. I mean, like how it embedded within so many different cultures it is,
Yep.
right? Like there's the sugar cube kind of
Mhm.
turpentine thing. In India, there was regular usage of castor oil, right? To help people kind of cleanse things out regularly. Um, so yeah. And I mean, it's because really parasites are the most common life form in the entire world, right? I mean, they outnumber normal life significantly. So it's just kind of all of life has really just been this evolutionary arms race against evolving cooperative life and the parasites that are trying to steal life from the cooperative life. And that's been a lot of our human history too, right? And that's part of the reason why we've even evolved a lot of these kind of social behaviors to avoid like filth, right? And avoid, why do you want to stay away from cow dung? Why do you want to stay away from things that are, smelly and all that? Well, a lot of it is kind of this innate broad defense against getting infected, right?
I think I saw you posted the book. I think it was your brain on parasites. And
Yeah.
in college, I read Parasite Rex just on
Oh,
my
that's a really
own.
good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good one for sure.
Yeah, the history, it's wild. And then when you get into, like I mentioned, turpentine, but there's these like unconventional treatment options. And I think even the Farmer's Almanac there, for swine, for pig, they used tobacco leaves. And I've even seen, I think THC and cannabis acts as an anti-parasitic, although that has other negative effects that I'm not a fan of. Uh, but
Yeah.
even I think alcohol has somewhat effects. So I've been playing around with dry gin lately, just Z-biotic before to protect from the acetaldehyde. And I feel like ethanol in the right context, like you said, timing, it's all timing.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, uh, with the cigar, not the same time, but just same day. I feel like it's been part of my detox program.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
Interesting. The dry gin. Yeah. It's the first time I hear that. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. I
Wow.
mean, it has a crazy history with. They even used to give it to babies with milk when they were crying,
No way.
and it's
Wow.
from juniper berries. There's a lot of herbs
Yeah.
involved in it, so it's
Oh, makes sense. Yeah.
one of the more medicinal ones. But yeah,
Interesting.
it's amazing all the tools. I mean, I think it, like you said, staying open minded and seeing the multidimensional picture.
Sure.
There's, I think, what at certain times it could add in things that people would think, oh, that's unhealthy to do. I'm like, well, in this context, it could actually be beneficial.
Yeah, all rules have an exception. I mean, even like THC has some medicinal properties, right? But of course, they've typically weed is, way grown to kind of
Yeah,
chase that one number, and it's completely
yeah,
unbalanced plant, and it
yeah.
has a whole host of other issues and stuff, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, no, on that thing about Parasite Rex, that's a fantastic book for sure. And it speaks a lot into the whole like psychology of, how they can infiltrate themselves into a person, because a person gets exposed and it's kind of this like foreign consciousness in a way, and then it just starts to like mesh in, right? And it'll start to subtly mess with people's neurotransmitters and subtly start to make people crave certain things and behave in certain ways. And so really, as crazy as it sounds, if you are able to get the bulk of a person's parasites down, it's almost like an exorcism.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah. So
Oh, for
it
sure.
goes deep.
Yeah, every time I go to like Costco or a big box store, and I know there's a money aspect, but like now you can get grass-fed ground beef for really, like I could work a minimum wage job. I could work at McDonald's and afford to eat 100% grass-fed beef every day. It's possible, but yeah, I just see people and look at their body and look at what they're buying and
Yeah.
just the slop, and
Yeah.
it's evident that they have worms. They have something
Yeah.
inside of them that's making them grab that off the shelf that's technically not even food,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, crazy. I mean, a lot of people who have horses will typically deworm their horses regularly just to extend their lifespans. So, like, why are we just thinking about that? Or dogs too, right?
Yeah.
Think about
Yeah.
that, but we don't think about ourselves, right? And it's
Oh
kind of
yeah.
this weird gap, right? And it's so weird too how they're just almost like the physical embodiment of toxicity, right? I mean, they glob onto all the toxins, and then their behaviors, I guess you could say, are toxic, right? So when
Yeah.
you see people behaving in certain, like, you know, taking ways rather than
Mhm.
giving, there's often this kind of physical mirroring of the parasites there.
Yeah, I like that you said that they're linked with the heavy metals and the plastics and all the other stuff. So when you like you said pull away their fortress, um, that's why getting the metals out is so important, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're open minded. I mean, I've interviewed HTMA people, and it's like I see a lot of like, this way is the only way, or this way is the safest way. And I mean, I'm not on a mineral balancing
That's it.
program. I
Yeah.
think it's like a great option for people that are really sick. I mean, because
Mhm.
it's easy to follow, get
Sure.
regular hair test,
Yeah.
take the right supplements. I don't
Yeah.
think it's the only way, but I think it is one of the ways
Sure.
to radically improve someone's health for sure.
Yeah. Sure. Well, if you're trying to find something that actually like works for a person, like, you have to put dogma aside
Yeah,
always. Because mineral balancing is fantastic. People are super mineral starved, and absolutely the terrain change is critical. That's probably, again, one of the biggest mistakes. I was trying to kill off parasites without understanding that they're a reflection of the toxic environment and mineral deficient environment within me. Right. But at the same time, there comes a point where, you've cleaned a lot of the low hanging fruit up. Well, now it's time to kind of evict them, right? They made their way into the house. Now you're going to forcibly kind of pull the weeds from the garden as it's their time to go.
yeah,
But I think all things done strategically, for sure.
absolutely. Yeah. Was it Is it Dr. Wilson? I always forget that has the crazy like shadow people articles and all the
Oh man,
wild
yeah, that's a very.
esoteric.
I don't want to bash him too much, but it's pretty wild. I know some stuff on the inside. I mean, really, we could speculate as to what happened, but I just, pre 2018, his articles were phenomenal on hair analysis, super in depth, super well researched, super fascinating. And then he just started getting kind of wacky. Just, like,
Yeah.
I give a handful of examples, like, putting a cup of hydrogen peroxide next to their head because that would help the souls from the hydrogen peroxide, open people's chakras and help them develop faster. So really, just
Wow.
some pretty wild shit, right? We don't know exactly like what happened, and I want to respect it because he is like for sure a genius, right? But um, just we don't know. I think personally, my theory is inactive B6 toxicity. So a big issue with supplementation today is people don't understand that the form really matters. So,
Yeah.
like, I actually have a lot of cases of people that are just taking regular multivitamins and they are getting anxiety, peripheral neuropathy, insomnia, brain fog, tingling, weird, just neurological sensations. Um, and they check their blood and they find their B6 is off the charts, right? And it's because the inactive form of B6, right? Peroxidine HCl. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Pyridoxine
Yeah,
HCl. Yep.
pyridoxine HCl.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that one is not a form that can be used by the body and actually competes with the body in enzyme binding sites for the active form, right? B6, which is a P5P. So a lot of since it's cheaper to produce the inactive form, it's very common to have it in a bunch of supplements. And so, with all respects to mineral balancing, which I absolutely love mineral balancing, and it had a huge impact in my life personally. I think it's the way of the past to be solely using mineral balancing supplements that had inactive B6. And that's
Yeah.
why I think Dr. Wilson was doing. He was taking way too much of that. In my opinion, I honestly have no idea. So,
Yeah, they seem when I got those supplements, like a lot of them were tablets with a lot of excipients, the Endomet, and
yeah,
this was a couple years ago, I think, and
yeah,
yeah, all crappy forms. And as someone
yeah,
that's been studying supplements since 2010, that was the
yeah,
first thing I noticed. It's like these are like supplements from the 70s. Like, why
yeah,
haven't they
yeah.
been upgraded? So,
Well, they
um,
have been now. I mean, Valence Nutraceuticals, I
yeah,
know, like
Matt.
Matt
Mhm.
Kaufman. Yeah, awesome guy. Yeah, they've really solved a big need in the mineral balancing community, I think, which
Yeah,
is high quality bioavailable forms of minerals and nutrients and, grass fed glandulars for that. And then it's really made the whole program a lot more tolerable for people. And it's really kind of let's continue to improve the results that people can get with mineral balancing, which can be pretty powerful on its own.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. It's funny talking to like Jeff Leone with the LegoScan, and then talking to Jeff Hoyt with the Zeolite Labs, and seeing the different approaches to this problem of um, not just mineral deficiency, but mineral dysregulation, right? And this imbalance in the levels. And yeah, I think my current protocol is basically just 30 grams of zeolite a day, high dose melatonin every day. I think I've
amazing.
been doing this for like a year and a half now,
Yeah.
pretty sure a year at least. And then taking the regular stuff, the zinc, the magnesium, vitamin K2, vitamin E, enzymes. It's kind of my current protocol. It seems to be working. I mean, as long as you can sense that you're steadily, noticeable increase in mental functioning and energy and mood and
Yeah,
stuff,
for sure.
you
For
know.
sure. Yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it for sure. I mean, you just kind of want it to track as your baseline, gently kind
Mhm.
of going up day to day.
Yeah. It sounds like you're not a fan of blood tests, or do you think? I mean, my current view on blood work, like all the biohackers, they're like just so much blood work every year. I think it's way overkill. I think serum ferritin is really useful, and I think
Sure.
25D is very useful. Beyond those two, I mean, I don't know, maybe looking at
Yeah.
PTH or
I mean,
thyroid, but
it's blood work is fantastic. Um, Especially with this, depending on the skill of the practitioner who can actually order the right labs. It's good to look at your thyroid. Like the HTMA can absolutely assess your thyroid function, but I think it's also good to get an assessment of like a person's, TSH and the T4, T3, and all that. And there's a couple other ones too, but that's cheap, right? What I think can be kind of an issue is when you start spending thousands and thousands and thousands on lab work. And that's money that if you just have a good, basic, comprehensive metabolic panel and the basic blood work and a hair test and a really good assessment of a person's history and symptoms, you can put that towards healing and get amazing results.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my thing with it. Like I absolutely respect blood work. I think it's super important, especially when you're dealing with more sensitive cases, when people have, like cancer and all that stuff, I generally stay away from that. It's kind of not my field of expertise by any means, but it's good to kind of like track. But at the same time, it's really easy to start just treating a test, right? I mean, yeah, there's the argument test, don't guess, absolutely assess, right? But you also don't want to see people as a number and
Yeah.
just chase the number. You want to see people as a whole system, right? So yeah, kind of a gray area
Yeah.
in my opinion. So
Yeah, absolutely. With the guest I interviewed before you, I just learned that you could actually test the stool of your cat or your dog to see like IgE levels and leaky gut and all
yeah.
this stuff. And I'll probably do that before I test my own gut with the GI stool map, which is hilarious. Uh, but yeah, I
Right
like
on.
the non-invasive nature of like
Hair
hair,
tests.
urine, stool.
Yeah,
Like I don't like needles. They're not fun. It's probably a huge stress to the body, right?
for sure. Yeah, I mean, blood is it's your life itself, right? So I get that. Yeah, hair analysis is it's fascinating how such a simple test can give you so much information in terms of like person's detox pathways. The main thing I look for is like, are they an accumulator or are they an excreter? Because if they're an accumulator, right, all their heavy metals are actually very poor eliminators, are all super low. Um, that tells me that they are probably having a really high body burden, and it tends to come out in really high levels later on. And those are typically the sickest people, right? So there's that. And then, of course, some of the major mineral ratios that you see on hair tissue mineral analysis, of course, performed by the right laboratory, like sodium potassium ratio, can give a lot of useful insight as to what blend of minerals and vitamins are going to work for a person, which ones aren't. Um, so yeah, you can get a lot of good information and assess their thyroid, assess their adrenal glands, and interestingly, it's also kind of a window into a person's psychology. So really commonly, you can see things that are happening in a person's emotional world and then their external world through hair analysis. An example of that is a calcium shell, right? So
Mm.
when people's calcium kind of goes off the chart, and it kind of ties into the whole calcification issue as a whole. But when people's calcium tends to go off the chart, we call that a calcium shell, right? And that is often like a defensive posture from the body where it's allowing excess calcium to precipitate around the nerves and kind of numbs a person from the external world, can kind of like erect this kind of bomb shelter. And we see that with like trauma. We see that with people who have like really abusive relationships, or really a job situation or a living situation that really does not serve them. So yeah, there's a lot of other kind of examples, like, sodium potassium ratio. I often call it the presence ratio. So depending on how balanced that is, person, I see, for example, meditators, people who are really work in that realm of trying to be like grounded in the present moment, tend to have balanced sodium potassium ratio. The people with a higher sodium potassium ratio tend to be more forward looking, tend to also be like getting things done, but to an extreme become ungrounded, scattered, and also just like obsessed with the future. And then the opposite, right? Low sodium potassium ratio is people that are stuck more in the past. They have a lot of emotional burdens typically, or they feel stuck, or they feel withdrawn. And at a very low level, we look at it as a trauma indicator, actually. So something in the past is really kind of keeping them stuck. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, you've probably seen over the years, I've focused pretty heavily on iron and have still come full circle and, graduated from the everybody's iron toxic
Mhm.
religion to, there's, it's more detailed than that. And
Yeah.
people could genuinely be iron deficient. There's stages to iron deficiency. It's not just anemia.
Mhm.
But the connection with copper is really fascinating. And then you throw zinc in the mix, and those three minerals are really, really interesting. I notice every time I supplement copper, especially on an empty stomach, I'll feel nauseous. And I did the high copper for a while with
Oh, well.
copper sulfate, which
Yeah.
I think they use to clean pools, and it's uh, it's a harsh thing. I did it actually mid interview, and I felt really nauseous for 10 minutes. It was a dumb decision
Yeah.
to do
No, we
that,
all
but
were.
but I was rubbing it on my skin, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a little more cautious with copper now. I'm more of a fan of supplementing zinc, and that's kind of what I tell people. But
Yeah. Well, I
um,
think even for that purpose, right? Like, because if you supplement zinc long term, zinc is, I mean, we know pretty much for sure that everyone's deficient in it to
yeah,
some degree, just because of how, every kind of detox process essentially, it's going to have zinc involved in some part of it, right? I mean, or a person's like stress responses, right? I mean, it's just so foundational to how a person handles the stressors of life. And so also our soils are insanely depleted of it, right? It's probably the main thing. But long-term supplementation of just zinc sometimes can cause like an imbalance in copper, right? And on a hair test, how we perceive that is a person's sodium potassium ratio just drops, right? It tanks. So, that's when we're like, okay, well, let's give them a mixture of zinc, copper, B6, active B6, of course, manganese and other stuff. And it kind of perks them right back up. Right?
do you think it's safe for people to drink out of those pure copper drinking vessels, the
Yeah.
containers?
I mean, I personally don't think so. Just because like you need to know like what your status is with your copper toxicity, right? Or your
Mhm.
copper imbalance, or do you actually need copper? So it's kind of one of those things that I would prefer people not to guess on. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've tried so many different ones. I like those over the years because you can just drop them on the concrete and they'll bounce. But now I'm rarely around concrete, thankfully. And so usually, but
Good stuff.
I just use like a glass coated, or no, I think it's stainless, but it has a UV basically little
Oh,
light.
nice.
And so because
Little
I know that,
survival.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you have, it'll just get gross if you keep refilling the same bottle. So
Yeah.
the Purist is a good one. They like line it in glass, even though it could bounce and you could drop it on the street.
For sure.
But
Sure.
yeah, I'm on I think copper water bottles are safe if the water is not corrosive. So if the water went through deionization, like through the Midolife filter, not to make it a sales pitch, but then it won't try to leach what it's in.
Mm,
Uh, so
that's a
that
really
would
good
be my
point.
caveat there. But people have to know
Yeah.
what they're doing, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's a good point for sure. Yeah.
What while we're on the topic, what is your whole philosophy on water? And I won't judge whatever it is, like, because I know a lot of people are, spring is the ultimate, or primary water. Uh, just one. I know you mentioned tap. You're not a fan of, which I'm not
Yeah,
either.
for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'd hope most people aren't. Um, yeah. So, I mean, everyone has such strong opinions in this space, but, water, I just kind of, it's been an exploratory thing in terms of like, what do I see like hydrates people the best?
Mhm.
And just how do people feel best? So a lot of this is kind of anecdotal, mind you. My opinion is
Yeah.
based around this beyond like, well, is your water tested for toxins, right? Or is it coming out of plastic water bottles, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I do think spring water tends to work best for people. Um, the people in the Cellcore community are all about like distilled water.
Mhm.
I like
All right.
personally a mix of spring and distilled,
All right. This
right?
interview's over. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, I like a little distilled every once in a while, right? But spring is the main one, right?
Mhm.
And but of course, getting like a high quality water filter overall system at home is probably the most accessible way and the most kind of uh, long term way of approaching it. So you don't have to constantly be buying stuff, right? So yeah, I don't really have any strong opinions in this space. I just kind of like tell people, well, find what works for you, and I just give some general guidelines like, hey, like your carbon filters probably not working, probably still super toxic and all sorts of stuff, and other stuff like get a shower filter can be a big game
Yeah.
changer because you're going to be when it's hot, your pores open, you're drinking in all that water essentially. So you're essentially drinking tap water every day if you don't have a shower filter.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't believe in like alkalized water or alkaline water, just because they tend to be like toxic in other things like titanium, and water is going to be naturally alkaline from like spring, or you can remineralize it in other ways with like little pinches of salt or fulvic humic and that kind of thing. So
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I just bought a test. I have it downstairs. I have to do a sample. My tap score, I'm going to start promoting them. They have a pretty cool, just at home, either city or well or whatever, spring even. You can collect a sample, mail it in, and have like different levels of tests. So I got the $900. They look at like 185 things, but you can even test glyphosate on that site,
nice.
which is cool. And radiation, pesticides.
Yeah.
I mean, all sorts of stuff. So it'll be fun to
Yeah.
see. I think I'm at like 2,200 feet up here in North Idaho. I'm curious if there's some crazy unnatural thing in my well. That would be fascinating because it's like pretty remote.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's an interesting thing. Manganese toxicity is really common from well water, actually. So it typically shows up as like high manganese on a hair test. So that's something to be aware of if someone has like a well at their house. Like you want to,
mm,
not a sales pitch, but definitely get a hair analysis just to make sure you're not getting exposed to it, or just
yeah.
test your water, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a good point to make, and this is something that has fascinated me since I've had interviews on this the last couple of years, is you mentioned the forms as far as supplementing that
mhm,
matters, but there's also like toxic forms that get stuck in the tissue,
mhm,
like manganese, right? Like
mhm,
there's the manganese. I forget the supplement that I was taking for a while that had it in it, what form it was, what it was bound to. But there's the manganese in the tap
mhm.
water, which is a toxic form that you don't want, right? And so when you're like mineral balancing or taking a binder, you will excrete the toxic forms, and then you want to replace it with the beneficial forms, right?
Yeah, very true. Like
Yeah.
iron oxide and manganese
Hmm.
oxide and all that stuff, the kind of stuff that
Hmm.
we can't really use biologically. Um, so that is something we see in mineral balancing a lot. If you do kind of a good job, you'll see an increase of manganese or copper or iron in a person's retest, and that's typically a sign that you're pushing the toxic forms out and bringing in the good forms, right?
Oh, oh,
So, but a cool thing about fulvic humic, and by the way, just like with anything else, quality matters so much in this space.
hmm,
There's so many like really bad forms of that. And there's a lot of really bad shilajits, and there's a lot of really bad, um, you know, just humic supplements.
yeah.
But the really good ones that are clean and have high electrical potential and all that stuff, they're actually a redox molecule, and they can donate electrons to these bio unavailable forms of minerals like manganese, and actually can help change their form and make you absorb it properly. Right? So it's a very interesting quality about them.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I listened to Luke Story interview. Oh, I can't remember the woman that sells. She was basically saying how those salt packet products are bad. And she sells, oh, what was it? She has like the fulvicumic product
Mhm.
that's
Oh,
big about
is
it.
it Beam?
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I tried it and I'm like, I feel like I should just put this in my soil. I'd rather just take no, not bashing them,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
felt more like a garden amendment.
Sure. I got you. Well, I mean, it's kind of like cleaning up your inner soil in a
Yeah.
way, you know? So,
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I've been learning a lot just having a garden. It's really cool to I actually just had my garden tested by a local woman and got the results back, or she got the results back recently. And it's kind of like the Albrecht method.
mhm,
I think Crucial Flora Charles is into, and
sure.
she's like, yeah, your pH is the soil is actually too high, but it's one of the better soils I've seen because I used like a sandy loam material locally. So I'm going to use like peat moss to bring it down. But what's interesting is the pH of the soil determines what minerals the plants can uptake. So that's like the determining factor. So
Interesting.
a lot of
Yeah.
the minerals are in the soil. It's just if the plants can't grab them, usually it's a pH. Not
Yeah.
always, but usually it's a pH issue.
Interesting. Well, I guess same thing happens in a person's body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool the connection. And by the way, manganese bisglycinate, that was the form that I was
That,
playing around with.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was like my second guess, third
Yeah.
guess, maybe.
Yeah. Well, let's see where we can go from here now. Any cool like fun supplements or health technologies that you haven't talked about that you've played with that you've enjoyed over the years as far as energetic stuff, Rife, PEMF,
Mhm.
quantum crazy stuff, anything?
Yeah. Oh, quantum crazy stuff. I love it. Yeah. There's so many out there. PMF is awesome. I love it for injuries for sure. And it's gonna like tie into that whole like biophysics of like, well, how much energy does your cell have to actually do detox? Right. So PMF I think is a really cool tool for that. Um, let's see, red light, infrared, all the basics, right? All the biohacker tools. I'm a really kind of minimalist. I like just the elements, right? So I just love
Mhm.
breath work. I love extreme cold and extreme heat, right? So like people have pretty strong opinions about cold plunging, which
Mhm.
I agree. I think there's a big subset of people that probably should not do that because their adrenals are absolutely cooked and they are just not able to like positively adapt to it. But at the same time, I mean, the ability for it to like create mitochondrial biogenesis and improve your longevity potentially, right? It's almost like you kind of, when those people that try to live forever and they freeze themselves in a cryo chamber, and you're
Uh-huh.
doing that on a micro scale, I think with cold plunging. Um, so, so yeah, there's a lot of different directions I could go there, but I typically like to stay to the basics, in my opinion.
That's
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up cold plunging because right now it's like I think it's like 33 degrees outside, which is actually the warmest it's been in a while. And it's supposed to be in the 40s Fahrenheit next week, which is super warm to me. But I actually have a like I started doing it back in like 2016, 2017 with the chest freezer, and I
For sure.
grounded the water. I put in lodestones, solar noon. I wasn't doing it right though. I was doing like ice from the convenience store and spending exorbitant amount every time with which I then learned if you just have another chest freezer and just freeze packs, then you have an
Mhm.
endless way to cool it, for cheap. But
Nice
yeah, it
trick.
made a tremendous impact on my brain function. And I remember just feeling super high and euphoric for the rest of the day. Like the effect wouldn't last a couple hours, it would last
Yeah.
like 8 to 10 hours for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the
Um,
spikes in dopamine you get from that are like the levels you get from recreational drugs, except like long lasting, right? So, I
yep.
mean, if you do, a certain thing that's nasal, it'll last you, I don't know, 30 minutes, right? But cold plunging can actually produce that kind of euphoric feeling for an extended period of time,
Mhm.
which is pretty awesome. But the main thing that
Yeah.
I really like about it, it's like mental training. It's
Mhm.
like, I personally never want to get in the cold plunge ever, like a single time. But it's kind of that, you're facing something that is giving you a lot of discomfort, and that is like life itself. There's a lot of things that we need to do and we're meant to do that give you discomfort, and you get this opportunity to kind of break through that wall, and it ends up showing up in other areas of your life.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's awesome. And what I think I have one here I'm going to set up. It's the same company from Seattle that makes my sauna, Redwood Outdoors. They're great, and I'm not an affiliate, but they have there's a million Morosco and all the ones. This one was actually like half the price of a lot of the ones in the market, but filtration built in and the UV ozone, whatever it is, which is if you shower before, you never have to clean it essentially. So I'm going to set that up in my basement. And my idea is, without killing myself, put a infrared heat lamp above.
Yeah.
Because I would usually wear a beanie, keep my hands out, and wear booties like neoprene boots, like 2 mm or 3 or whatever. And that made it actually easy for me. Like, just keeping the extremities from freezing is huge. And then if you keep the head warm, I feel like it's way easier. And then my sweet spot, like what I'll probably set it to, is like 57 Fahrenheit.
Okay.
56, 57. I mean, I got down to low 40s once, but
Yeah.
from my understanding, colder's not better. And I think I was listening to Gary Brecka the other night. I'm not a huge fan, but I just follow everybody to see what they're saying. And he was like, he's selling a cold plunge, and he was like, minimum was it 90 seconds, maximum 3 minutes or something like that. What's your opinion on the timing of it? I used to chill in there for 20 minutes.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, a lot of the research is typically done about like just brown adipose tissue in terms of benefits. That's what people typically are citing. Like I think Huberman was talking about like the 11 minutes per week and divided doses, I think is what he mentioned. And that's kind of more based on like brown adipose tissue. But I personally haven't looked too much into the science. I don't care. Honestly, I just kind of, I just listen to my body in that regard. And I just love that I get into a really good kind of meditative space when I'm in there. And so, if it's 3 minutes that I'm in there, or if, 15 pass by, I guess it depends on the temperature you're in too. But yeah, I will again say though that, if you are dealing with chronic symptoms and chronic illness, like I tried cold plunging when I was sick, and that destroyed me, like absolutely just nuked me. Because you just don't have the resources to like adapt in a healthy way,
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely not for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's easier to do in the summer. Like right now, I don't really have a huge drive to do it, but I think I could do a short one
For sure.
in the
For
winter.
sure. Or you just walk outside and you're good to go. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sensory deprivation. Have you done that or?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Like float tanks. Yeah. It's, I mean, again, I'm so simple in terms of like the tools that are available. I really just think, you can't go wrong with just having a regular practice to create inner space. I feel like there's this whole like elemental understanding from, yoga tradition of like, fire, water, earth, and air. And I think that's what people really focus on. But I think probably the thing that people are missing the most is this idea of like space. People don't really have inner space. They kind of fill their lives with thinking, stimulation, consumption, right? Or trying to be productive. And it's the space that I think allows a person to really kind of, first off, actually enter a healing zone, right? Where you can just relax and be with yourself and not have to particularly do anything, but also creating this space that allows a person to actually feel like inner contentment and inner peace, really. Because otherwise it's really easy to get stuck kind of chasing external things without that space for something to come from within. So I typically recommend it as part of all of my programs, like find something that creates inner space for you on a regular basis, whatever. There's so many different techniques out there, whether it's breath work or some sort of meditation, or just, I don't know, have a cup of coffee in the morning, looking out to the sunset, or whatever does it for you. But it's something that I think is so important today, where it seems like the world more than ever before wants to intrude into our inner space. And again, that relates to the whole like disconnecting us from us, because I think you need to have space to feel who you are, and I think you need to have space to express who you are, not get connected to everything that's external.
I love that. Yeah. Is that where the name of your company came from? GOT?
Jyoti, yeah.
GOT.
So, yeah, it's kind of similar, but the idea with that is it's a Sanskrit word for essentially light and brilliance. And my experience has been, when you clean the physical vessel, like who you are, your light just kind of shines through. So
That's really cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, I love that message. It's whether it's the COVID times or for me just living remote, I've noticed that it's it's more of a challenge. And I think more than ever for people to get off of screens. And you mentioned Tesla. I mean, all new cars now, Tesla or not, there's a big screen in the center console
Yeah.
between the two seats. And
Yeah.
all EVs have that screen, but even gas rigs and diesel have the screen as well, unless you go like I don't know, 80s or something. I'm looking at getting an old like box Chevy, like a 70s analog, as like an ultimate like prepper vehicle. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's
You
just
gotta, you gotta be.
right. It's like from screen to screen, right? The little screen, bigger screen, all different size screens, just all day long,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not a
Well,
lot of eye contact. And
yeah. Well, it's a poor replacement to reality, right? I mean, we have like an inner screen that's multidimensional, which is our own imagination, right? And we're supposed to tap into that. But, more and more, I think kids are also getting sucked into the screens and they're less connected to their inner imagination. And so it's all this is just like a poor kind of like copy, inversion of reality, really, of how things I think should be, which is, connections, eye to eye, real in person. Of course, there's so many benefits of like being connected technologically, like this podcast right now. Pretty sweet. It's
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I think it takes a higher degree of self mastery than ever before to remain centered and solid in yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. And I find living in the mountains, because I moved to you being in down in San Diego, like Big Bear's big tourist destination. That was my first mountain, and then Idyllwild, that almost became my permanent home, but it's California, and then I moved to North Idaho. And I find just living in the mountains, and I guess people by the beach, same thing. It makes it a lot easier if you have the beach
Yeah.
or the mountains and a lot of trees. um, just all the stimulation, the natural stimulation from just the micro, leaves blowing in the wind and everything. And
Yeah.
um,
Well, I
really,
mean, I lived in LA for 2 years, and that was, I think, most brutal time ever, just because my nervous system always felt like it was short circuiting, really. Like it was always kind of buzzing. Um, and just moving out of that, even just to somewhat remote San Diego, and make a big difference. Um, yeah.
yeah, super cool. Well, this was awesome, man. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. We covered quite a bit, and yeah, it's just awesome the solutions that you're sharing, and I like your comprehensive approach that you're not just only HTMA and mineral balancing, but you look at the liver and, well, I guess, I mean, they would argue they look at all that stuff,
Yeah,
but
for
just
sure.
the
For sure.
tools that you talk about
Yeah.
in addition, it's really cool. So
Sweet.
gotmineralbalancing.com, is that where people should go?
Yeah, so Jyoti is JYOTI mineral balancing, or you could just do JYOTIMB.com. That's my homepage. Got a bunch of free resources, free guides. You can find me there. Any episodes I'm doing, or just contact me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Looks like you're on TikTok too. Is that back
I,
up? I guess.
I don't know. I put a lot of energy into that a while ago, but I kind of stepped away. I just felt like the people that were reaching me through there were they were kind of stuck in the dopamine roller
Yeah,
coaster, and they weren't ready to make, I think, profound change. I found more that people who listen to long form podcasts like this one are the ones that typically are ready for profound change.
that
So
makes sense. Yeah. TikTok is the ultimate swiping app. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. It's just literally just gambling in your pocket. Yeah. So
Awesome. Well, awesome, Kyle. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show. I had a lot of fun, and maybe we'll do it again at some point. I need to retest my hair, so
yeah, I got your back. You want it? Sure.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Sweet.
But Matt, thank you so much, man. It was an honor to be on your show. So
I loved it. Well, thanks, and stick around as we close it out. Appreciate it. I really like Kyle's methodical approach with starting with the bowels first and just that order of operations. I have a lot of conversations with people that are helping me on projects, and there's just a lot of question of where do I start? And there's just so much information out there. So to have a easy to follow order of operations is really beneficial. And I like that he uses hair tissue mineral analysis. I think like the Oligo scan, that's a great non-invasive test that you can use to assess someone's health and really dial in the next steps. If you guys would like to work with Kyle, his website is GOT Mineral Balancing. That's JYOTI mineralbalancing.com. He has a 3-month, 6-month, and 9-month coaching program where you can either do one HTMA test, which is not ideal. You usually want to do a couple in a row, and then ideally 3 plus in a row. And that way you could really start to see which direction you're trending with your health. And if you're working with Kyle, I'm sure it will be trending upwards. My website is matt-blackburn.com. Just got a nice overhaul, so definitely go and check that out. I have all the podcasts there that are more organized now. If you click on the shop tab, you can actually categorize the different categories of products that I've had podcasts about or talked about over the years. I've gotten a few questions the last few weeks about the Rosita cod liver oil. One person said, you haven't talked about it in a while. Are you still a fan of it? Do you not like it anymore? There's so many things that I do that I can't talk about all of them consistently. But yes, I'm a huge fan of the Rosita cod liver oil. Another person asked me about eye floaters the other day and what I recommend for those. I've heard really beneficial results with the Rosita cod liver oil for eye floaters. I would definitely take vitamin E, not at the same time, but just within the same day as the cod liver oil, as vitamin E protects from vitamin A toxicity, which is really overblown. A lot of people tend to be vitamin A deficient, especially with a vegan and vegetarian history like myself. Vitamin A deficiency could be a root cause to a lot of your health issues. So the Rosita cod liver oil is an awesome source of that high quality vitamin A. My brand is MitoLife. Just mentioned the vitamin E. That's one of the best selling products. It's called PUFA Protect. PUFA stands for polyunsaturated fatty acids. And it's just a type of fat, a category of fat that has multiple double bonds in it. So within that category, you have omega-3s and omega-6s. Largely, those are the two that are most talked about. And that is in contrast to saturated fats that are more stable, which you find in dairy products, butter, cheese, milk, that are less prone to oxidation. So what vitamin E does in our system is it's lipophilic, means it's fat loving. It goes into the cell membranes, stores there, and it protects our cell membranes from what's called lipid peroxidation, which is increased by electromagnetic radiation, EMR, and all sorts of different chemical assaults will increase lipid peroxidation. So PUFA Protect stays in your system and is actually recycled by ascorbic acid, vitamin C. Well, not ascorbic acid, it's actually in the form of ascorbate once it's stored in your body. But vitamin C deficiency could increase lipid peroxidation by wasting your vitamin E. You need vitamin C. I don't think it's emphasized enough to recycle your vitamin E once it donates an electron. And on that note, I've been speaking quite a bit about EMFs on my social media account on Instagram. Namely, I've been shooting up EMF energy emitting devices with my shotgun. And I'm just fed up with these devices that cost $3,500, $4,000 that are supposed to be doing something for EMFs, harmonizing the environment or emitting a scalar field, whatever they claim with their marketing. But they're very expensive. And a lot of the people that are buying these devices and quantum cube products aren't on the basics. So I've decided to just go full speed ahead, pedal to the metal, all out, talking about the importance of ascorbic acid, which is synonymous with vitamin C. Ascorbic acid is vitamin C. If you didn't know, there's no such thing as whole food vitamin C. Mixed tocopherol vitamin E, which is what I sell, PUFA Protect. magnesium, zinc, melatonin. Those are the big EMF protectors. And there's a lot of people spending thousands and thousands of dollars focusing on the wrong thing. Where for EMF mitigation, like I'm flying in a plane in a few days for my brother's 40th birthday, I'll be taking vitamin C every hour and maybe even more frequently if I'm feeling it. 1.2 grams, 1,200 milligrams, 4 MitoLife vitamin C capsules, and 200 milligrams of melatonin that night, and then zinc and magnesium with my meals during that day, vitamin E with my meals, and vitamin C just with me in my backpack to take throughout the day consistently. A lot of biohackers talk about methylene blue for flying, which is great. It's awesome for infections. It really does help. They talk about molecular hydrogen for flying, but to me, way more foundational because we don't have a nutritional requirement for methylene blue. Vitamin C is more foundational. And contrary to what people say, that you just pee it out, no, it actually gets stored in the body in the form of ascorbate. So check out the posts that I've been doing, Matt Blackburn on Instagram. I've been putting a lot of information out there about practical EMF mitigation. And I'll be talking more about that in future shows. I have a cool one scheduled on dirty electricity coming up at the end of this month. So if you enjoy the show, please share it with family and friends. There's a new episode released every Friday. See you guys next week. Stay supercharged.